Hello, Pam here. The last video I made, I talked a little bit about reincarnation, and I tried to be scientific in terms of approaching it as an idea that it's an experience most of us have in terms of deja vu, and deja vu would make us think that we've been reincarnated. And my only point was that I think that it's possible that our ancestors' memories are stored in our DNA the same way that physical traits are, the same way that our instinctual behavior is. I think that a lot of that can be wrapped up into our programmed response to stimulus that's passed on. So I think sometimes people have experiences that stimulate this. I think psychoactive drugs are one thing that can do that. And I think that experience might produce what people see are these hallucinations created, like DMT, insectoids, or the aliens. What if, and my only suggestion is this, is that if these memories are, if you had the memory of being a sperm or an egg, and you somehow could remember the perceptions of what it was like to be in that first person perspective, what would another bacteria cell look like to you? What would a virus look like to you? Would it look alien? Would it look like these creatures? And again, I don't know, but I think that it's possible that we actually have these memories in us, and that these things that people are tapping into aren't necessarily outside of us. They could be, but I think that it's really very, very possible that it's just really all a type of strange memory that we're accessing. So in this, I want to talk really briefly about the possibility of understanding what these DMT elves are and the hallucinations, and maybe how people have come to perceive these things. So I'm going to talk really briefly about some of the history of the language, again, getting back to the words we use to describe this. And then I want to talk a little bit about imprinting on the brain and language, and basically describe another alternative, again, as opposed to seeing these alien beings. Perhaps it's really just an epigenetic process that induces like neuroplasticity that's taking place in our brains. So let me review this. We'll get started and get right into this. Yesterday, I talked briefly in a video about the idea of reincarnation, and I want to continue that idea a little bit more specifically. There's a lot of people who have promoted the idea and the language that these are mystical experiences, and they talk about fairies and elves. And so if you were to, say, go around reading somebody like Terence McKenna, William Burroughs, Carlos Castaneda, some of these more imaginative writers, you might then use their language to describe your own experiences. So if you had some mystical experience and you had a hallucination and you didn't know how to describe it, well, you'd already read about elves and fairies, and so that's maybe what you would use, is that language. And we think about that as imprinting. So once you've had that impression put on you, you're going to use that language. When I was young, I didn't read any of those people. My friends and I would party, and we would do some psychedelic drugs. When I was kind of a country boy, so for us, we were just out tripping, and things were melting and breathing, and like whatever the experience was, it was nothing other than us taking some sort of drug and messing with our minds. But I liked it, and I continued to want to understand it and study it as a science. And so invariably I had to read all of this stuff and these mystical people, and you sort through them, and it seems really fantastical and romantic. But romanticizing this, I think, can be very dangerous. And so I think people like Terence McKenna that promote this idea of elves and fairies and all that, I think it's utter nonsense. And I think, again, it's more likely that we're basically involving ourselves in a biological process. And that part of that process induces neuroplasticity, which changes the way that your brain is interacting with all its sensory perceptions. You're also maybe then having an epigenetic process where your genes are being switched on and off. So, for example, I did some people like for the alien abduction. Okay, first of all, maybe there's two ways to look at that. The alien abduction that people talk about when you're born. If you had a memory of being born in a Western hospital, it pretty much is like an alien abduction. You know, you come out of a safe, comfortable womb into this sterile environment with these bright lights. Theoretically, when I was born in 1970, you know, doctors wore all gray-green, those types of scrubs. They wore goggles. They had something on their head. All you would see were big, bright goggles. That's the only thing you would see, and a green face. They would grab you out of this womb. They'd slap you. They'd give you shots. They basically perform experiments. But you don't have any language. You can't talk. You have no way to acknowledge or to describe what's happening to you. And it takes years before you learn language. And by then, you know, those experiences are far behind you. But if in fact you ever could remember your birth, let's say that is part of something that could be stimulated through some type of a psychedelic drug, or even just a stressor in your life. We know that the same thing in life without drugs can occur through environment. So something could stimulate you. You have a memory of your birth, and all of a sudden it's like, I was abducted by aliens. Well, what seems more realistic, if you can think about that? So sometimes we think about these fantastic images that people get, like the DMT things. I think the DMT and some of these other creatures, there's another way to look at that. So years ago, I read Rick Strassman's book, The Spirit Molecule, and he did a lot of experiments with people where he injected them with DMT, massive amounts that you would never be able to get in a natural setting. I just don't think it's possible. So these people had tremendous, weird, freaky visuals, and hallucinations where they saw these things. And again, you're taking so many massive amounts of drugs and messing with the way your brain interacts with its sensory perceptions that maybe you are seeing aliens that are invisible in the room with you. I don't know. My own experiences have been on salvia that have been the most extreme, and I had that feeling like I was being cut up, taken apart, and put back together. It's weird. It's hard to describe, and a lot of other people have had those similar experiences. But the more I study this, the more I think about it. That cutting up, that alien abduction, that changing, it could literally be this language we use to describe the genes changing in us as we're having an epigenetic experience. I really don't know, but I think that, again, thinking about that this stuff is a biological process rather than some mystical experience is more important to try to guide our thinking in that way. Because we're at a point right now, again, to continue allowing people like humanities teachers to come up with words like entheogen. It's so far away from the idea that we have neuroanatomy, we have biochemistry, we have sciences that could actually describe what's taking place. And again, using more accurate language and allowing for that understanding of neuroplasticity and epigenetics as part of the process, I think will actually be more aligned. We'll actually accomplish what maybe Carl Ruck and Wasson and those guys wanted to do. Maybe they had the right intentions, but I think, again, the word entheogen is terrible. It's a horrible word to say. I can't stand it. Psychedelic, it does roll off the tongue, and I always use psychedelic in place of it just because I prefer it, and it's got a lot of political cachet. Also, so anyway, just want to say, think about that. Think about being born, DMT and all that, but I got some new gear here. This is a lot of people think this is satanic. It's really alchemy. I'm going to explain that in a later video, and I used to be into punk rock and a lot of the metal bands, so that was just kind of that. And then this other shirt here, Eat Me. These are all available at my website at skydos.com, so check it out. And again, think about the idea that all of this stuff is really inside you. It's not outside you. And thanks for listening. If you got any questions, any comments, please leave them in the thing. Subscribe and like, and I appreciate it. Feel good. Thanks.